They said I was lucky to spend my final years surrounded by family, but luck has a cruel sense of humor. When the whispers turned to orders and the kindness soured into control, I realized I was no longer a mother, I was a burden. And as my daughter-in-law tightened her grip on everything I once called mine, I chose silence, but only for a little while. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Judith Mallory, and once upon a time, I signed paychecks for people who ran countries. I was the woman behind the curtain, the name no one saw, but everyone feared. They don't know that. Not my son, and certainly not his wife. To them, I'm just an old woman with shaky hands and fading stories. But they've mistaken my silence for surrender, and soon, they'll regret that. They think I can't hear them when they whisper. But this house, my house, was built with secrets in its walls, and I've always known how to listen. In the cold hush of early morning, their footsteps echo louder than words. I hear them plodding just beyond the oak-paneled doors, their voices low and hungry, cloaked in false concern. It's always the same, plans wrapped in smiles, betrayal masked as family love. It's a familiar story, one I've lived too many times. But this isn't just another tale of betrayal, it's a suspense-soaked reckoning written in the language of legacy and power. Samantha, my daughter-in-law, walks like a queen through the halls now. She brushes her hand along the bannisters like she owns them. But she forgets, I commissioned those bannisters. I designed every inch of this estate, from the marble under her feet to the chandeliers she calls tacky. There's a reason why this old widow's stories aren't etched in journals or scrapbooks. They're alive in the silence, the creak of the floorboards, the way shadows fall just right at dusk. Judith's losing track of time again, she says sweetly when guests are near. Poor thing. But I see the smirk when no one's looking. I see how she moves my son, my only son, like a pawn across a chessboard she thinks she built. And I let her. Because in these kinds of stories, the best part is always the twist. She thinks I'm out of place. I think she's out of time. And so I sit. I wait. I collect details like fallen petals. Her favorite wine. The way she double-checks the safes when no one's watching. The passwords she thinks are clever. The help she underpays. Every act of disrespect, each one recorded, stored in the archives of a mind they say is slipping. There's something poetic about watching the villain write her own downfall in cursive. I watch Samantha flaunt her dominance in a house she hasn't earned. I let her feed the rumors of my senility, let her stage her betrayal in the open like I'm too blind to notice. But this is my story, my suspense. And I haven't even turned the first real page. The morning light pours in through the tall windows like liquid gold, warming the velvet drapes I chose 3 decades ago. Samantha says they're outdated. She wants to replace them with something modern, as if modern means better. But the moment she walks out of the room, I trace my fingers along the seams of the fabric and remember the day I bought them, how I sealed a 7-figure deal over tea in this very room, when my signature meant movement in markets. She doesn't know that part of me. To her, I'm just old Judith, the woman with trembling hands and fading stories. But the irony of it all? The trembling is an act. The forgetfulness? A performance in a long-running suspense I've mastered over time. This isn't her home. This is my kingdom, draped in dust and deception. And if this were one of those betrayal stories people eat up like tabloid candy, then Samantha would be the villain in designer heels, smiling for cameras while sharpening daggers behind closed doors. She's clever, though. I'll give her that. Every decision she makes now is calculated. The guest list for the dinner party last Thursday? Her hand. The wine selection? Her call. Even the music, a sterile blend of jazz and digital ambience, her doing. My preferences were erased, one tiny choice at a time. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. And no one notices, because who would question the generous wife taking care of her elderly mother-in-law? Not even Michael, my son. Michael. Once he held my hand as we walked the halls of this house, asking about every portrait, every vase. "Will this all be mine someday?" he used to ask. And I'd smile, press a finger to his nose, and say, "Only if you earn it." Now, he barely speaks to me. Too busy, too distracted, too entangled in the web Samantha spins around his heart and wallet. She's the puppeteer. He's the showpiece. 1 week ago, she moved my reading chair. It sounds silly, doesn't it? A chair? But I'd chosen that spot because it catches the afternoon sun just right. It's where I read letters from my late husband, where I used to sip Darjeeling tea and lose myself in quiet moments. She moved it closer to the kitchen for convenience, she said. I didn't argue. I let her win that one. But I made a note of it. In these long-buried stories of suspense and inheritance, it's never just about the chair. It's about the message underneath. She's saying, "You don't control anything anymore." And I'm saying, "Watch me." You see, Samantha thinks I've left the business world behind. That when I buried Charles, I buried my power. But what she doesn't know is I kept everything. Every account. Every holding. Every offshore file tucked away under ironclad names she'll never guess. I didn't become a billionaire by being trusting. She wants my name off the deeds, off the accounts, off the map. But I'm writing my own ending to this story. There are rumors in this house. Whispers among the staff. They say I'm planning something. I hear it in their careful silences when I enter the room. Good. Let them wonder. Because in betrayal stories like this one, the suspense lies not in if the victim strikes back, but when. And believe me, I will. You can learn a lot by pretending not to listen. Like how Samantha speaks to the staff when she thinks I'm asleep. How her voice, all sugar and silk in public, sharpens to glass behind closed doors. Judith needs rest, she tells the gardener, dismissing me from my own rose beds. She gets confused. She informs the maid after I ask for my ledgers. Those ledgers contain the truth, the stories I built this empire on, and she wants them forgotten, erased like the dust she forces them to wipe from my name. But those ledgers aren't gone. I had copies made years ago, long before she stepped into this house with polished smiles and plans. Hidden in the third drawer of my bedroom's antique writing desk, under loose sheets of stationery and old perfume bottles, lies the entire record of my holdings, acquisitions, and power. Power I never surrendered. You see, there's a rhythm to betrayal. It doesn't happen in one strike. No, it's a slow unraveling. First they isolate you. Then they undermine you. Then they smile, take your hand, and offer to help manage the estate. All for your well-being, of course. Also thoughtful. But this isn't Samantha's first betrayal. I've come to learn that. A few weeks ago, I found a letter she carelessly left on the hallway table. It was half-shoved into a folder of garden renovation invoices. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. It was from a lawyer. And it wasn't addressed to Michael. It was to Samantha, about transferring assets. Not from my name to his. No, from mine to hers. Quietly, discreetly, efficiently. A betrayal hidden inside bureaucracy. The kind of plot only someone like me would catch. Samantha is playing a game meant for people who've never lost. But I've tasted loss. I've buried love, watched fortune slip through hands not fast enough to close. I know suspense like I know the pulse in my veins. I know how it feels to stand in the middle of a storm and smile because you know you've built the shelter before the clouds arrived. This house has secrets. Behind the wine cellar wall, there's a room even Michael doesn't know exists. Charles and I had it designed as a security vault, a precaution from our days of risky ventures and discreet negotiations. In that room are tapes, documents, audio files, insurance policies for stories like this one. I visited it last night, moved quietly through the hallway with a flashlight, the kind Samantha thinks I can't operate. Down the stairs, behind the third wine rack, press, click, slide. The hidden door opened just as smooth as it did 20 years ago. Inside, the air was still, the silence thick. A place of memory and control. I retrieved a small envelope. Inside, a USB. Labeled in Charles's handwriting, if ever. What's on it? That's part of the suspense. But if Samantha knew, if she had any idea, she wouldn't sleep another night under this roof. This is more than just one of those betrayal stories people watch in silence, gasping at the final twist. No, this is real. This is personal. And unlike her, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the lesson. She thinks I'll die quietly, leave everything behind, and gift her the empire I built. But stories like mine don't end in silence. They end in fire. There's a certain type of silence that settles after a false compliment. At breakfast this morning, Samantha leaned over my chair, her hand ghosting over my shoulder like I was porcelain. "You look so rested today, Judith," she purred, her smile a ribbon wrapped around a dagger. "That lavender tea must be working wonders on your mind." My mind. She always goes for that. Not my body, not my will, but the mind. That sacred chamber where all my stories live, where the vault of memory holds her downfall like a coiled serpent. I stirred my tea slowly and smiled back. "Yes, dear. I've been sleeping better, dreaming even." She froze, only for a breath. But I saw it. You can't play suspense games with someone who wrote the playbook. Later, I sat alone in the solarium, the heat of mid-morning sunlight pressing through the glass. This house, filled with betrayal and varnished charm, had become my stage. The staff passed by with quick glances. They've started avoiding my gaze. I'm no longer the matriarch in their eyes. I'm the ghost who hasn't left yet. But they forget, I own every brick of this place. Michael doesn't ask about the estate anymore. Samantha handles all his questions. I suspect she's changed his access codes. Possibly blocked him from certain accounts. I wouldn't be surprised. Power, when it tastes that sweet, makes people do reckless things. And she's been reckless. Yesterday, I found a receipt. Tucked into a book in the library, used as a careless bookmark. It was for a pair of diamond earrings, $10,000, purchased with one of the shadow accounts under my name. Not a joint account. Mine. I memorized the number. I recognized the pattern. That account was meant for charities. Quiet gifts. Anonymous donations. Now it's jewelry. That was her first mistake. I made a call last night. Not from the house phone, of course. From the old burner I kept hidden in the lining of my coat. One of those artifacts from the business years, the years Samantha claims never really happened, because no woman could have had that kind of power alone. I called Evelyn, my solicitor. Loyal, sharp, still on retainer. "Activate the contingency," I said. There was no hesitation on the other end. "Understood, Mrs. Mallory." You see, this is what makes my story different. In most betrayal stories, the victim realizes too late. But I've seen the twist coming for years. I just let her build her confidence. I let the suspense simmer, like a velvet thread running through the fabric of our lives. What Samantha doesn't know is that I've already rewritten the will. Months ago. The true version, witnessed, notarized, and filed in a location she could never imagine. What she does know is this: she's close. Close to the kill. Close to the control. What I know is this: she's closer to the fall. Because you don't steal from a woman who made her fortune outmaneuvering kings. You don't underestimate someone whose entire legacy is built on knowing exactly when to strike. Samantha walks into the solarium now, her heels sharp on the tile. "There's a meeting this afternoon," she says. "Michael and I are reviewing estate allocations." I look up slowly. "Are you?" "Yes," she replies smoothly. "It's best if you rest. We'll take care of the paperwork." I nod, sip my tea again. "Of course, dear." Let her think the web is hers. Let her tighten it, thread by thread. Soon, she'll learn this isn't her story. It's mine. Suspense is like a thread. Tighten it too quickly, and it snaps. Let it stretch too long, and it loses tension. But when handled just right, it holds everything together, until the final pull. And today, I felt that thread twitch. Samantha hosted an afternoon tea for the Garden Society. Women with polished hands and cold eyes filled my drawing room, sipping from my china, smiling over my paintings. Samantha floated among them in cream silk, her voice dripping with charm. "The estate's been such a blessing," she said. "I've tried to modernize things a bit, refresh it." "Judith's been so supportive." Supportive. That word again. So gentle, so misleading. The guests nodded in approval, admiring the walls I built, the curtains I sewed, the history they couldn't see. They didn't notice that I hadn't spoken a word, that I sat by the window like a portrait, not a person. Silent. Watching. Storing every expression, every lie. She's laying the groundwork. I've seen it before in stories soaked in betrayal. The predator paints themselves as the savior. The victim becomes a relic, pitted, silenced, then erased. Samantha's preparing the narrative for when I'm gone. When the estate is sadly inherited. When the accounts are transferred in accordance with her wishes. Except my wishes are sharper than she thinks. I went to my room after the guests left. Closed the door, locked it. Pulled out the black journal I'd hidden in the lining of the old cedar trunk. Inside, coded notes. Names. Dates. Documents of everything she's done, every transaction she forged, every slip of control she thinks I didn't notice. Then I added one more detail, her phone call from yesterday. Yes, I heard it through the cracked office door. "Judith's not well," she said into the receiver. "We may need to move things along." Her voice was steady, controlled. But betrayal always leaves an echo, and I heard it. Later, Michael knocked on my door. "Mom, can I come in?" I hesitated, then opened it. He stood awkwardly, hands in pockets. "Sam says you've been forgetting things again." "Of course she does." I looked him in the eye. "Michael, do you remember when I taught you chess?" He blinked. "Yeah, I was 6. And what did I say about the queen?" He frowned. "That she's the most powerful piece on the board." I nodded. "That's right. But only if the player knows how to use her." He looked confused. I closed the door gently. Let the thought stew. Because Samantha may be maneuvering pawns, but I've positioned the queen. This isn't just one of those suspenseful betrayal stories you forget by morning. No, this is a reckoning, disguised in fine linen and estate wine. Tonight, I'll unlock the second safe. The one she doesn't know exists, behind the guest bedroom's false panel. Inside is the real will, the evidence, the final move, and once I open it, the clock starts ticking. It began with a missing document. Just one page, misfiled, misplaced, gone. Samantha tore the study apart this morning looking for it, her voice rising like steam behind the closed door. I listened from the hallway, unseen. "I just had it yesterday," she hissed into the phone. It was right in the blue folder. The one with the account access notes. She's unraveling. Suspense, when you live in it long enough, becomes instinct. I could smell her fear in the air, cloaked in citrus perfume, laced in clipped words. The thrill of the first crack. The beginning of her undoing. I left the page on purpose. Placed it between the pages of Great Expectations on the shelf in the main hall. A story about lost wealth, twisted motives, and assumptions. Fitting. I knew she wouldn't find it. She's never read a book in this house that didn't have a price tag still clinging to the back. Michael avoided me at breakfast. Averted eyes. Shifting hands. He's starting to feel the tension, but he can't name it yet. Can't see that the real suspense isn't in what Samantha's doing, but in what I've already done. Last night, I opened the guest room's false panel. A simple push near the baseboard. The panel clicked, revealing the hidden safe Charles and I had installed decades ago. I ran my fingers across the dial, the numbers etched into my memory like a lullaby. Inside, the real will. The documents that revoke every signature Samantha tricked from me. Copies of power of attorney forms she forged. Photographs of her transferring funds under fake names. A paper trail of betrayal woven into silk gloves. It's all there. But I didn't remove anything. Not yet. Because she still thinks she's winning. And in stories like this, the greatest suspense isn't in the fall, it's in the illusion of invincibility right before it. That afternoon, I walked through the garden alone. The same garden I designed stone by stone. Samantha saw me from the balcony. "You shouldn't be out without someone," she called down. Her voice sweet, tight. I smiled up at her. "I'm not alone." She tilted her head, confused. But I kept walking. Later, the maid found the shredded paper in the study fireplace. Samantha had burned something. Maybe an old draft of her fake legal filings. Maybe the letter from the lawyer. But even ashes leave a story behind. I'll have them sifted quietly. I have people for that, people who still remember who I am. She's losing control. She sharpens her tone now. Raises her voice when she thinks I'm not listening. Scolds Michael in the hallway. Snaps at the staff. This is how people collapse, not with silence, but with noise. She doesn't know that the trustees have been contacted, that the properties have been reassigned, that the inheritance, her golden carrot, is no longer where she thinks it is. This is the point in betrayal stories where the audience leans in. The suspense grows heavier, thick as velvet. And the villain begins to sweat. But I don't sweat. I sip tea. And wait. The first real crack didn't come from a confrontation. It came from a laugh. Mine. It was quiet, but clear, echoing off the cold walls of the dining room during lunch, when Samantha made one of her careful remarks. "We'll be making a few changes to the guest house this month. Michael agrees it's time we updated the property. Judith's not really using it anymore." She looked at me as she said it, daring me. I set my fork down gently. Then I laughed. Just once. A short, crisp note that rang like a silver bell. Michael looked up. The maid froze mid-pour. Samantha blinked, smile faltering for half a second. "Is something funny?" I dabbed the corners of my mouth with my napkin. "Just a thought, dear. About stories. How they end." She didn't respond. Not then. But I saw it, that flicker of unease, that doubt. For the first time, she didn't look quite so certain. That night, she rifled through my study. She thought I wouldn't hear. But I keep the hallway floorboards loose near the fireplace on purpose. You don't build an empire without building traps. She searched my desk, my drawers, even the underside of the carpet. But the will wasn't there. The account documents weren't there. She doesn't know I moved them again, this time to the old piano bench in the east parlor. Underneath faded sheet music. A place she's never even looked. I'm giving her just enough rope. The suspense is thick now. I feel it in every room, every silence, every pause between words. Even the staff sense it. They've started looking to me again, not out of fear, but expectation. As if they know something is coming. Something seismic. And it is. Because tonight, Evelyn arrives. I told Samantha we were expecting a guest. She didn't ask who. Just pursed her lips and said, "We'll have the room ready." She won't be ready. Evelyn isn't just my solicitor. She's my witness. The keeper of every secret Samantha thinks I forgot. The executor of the true will. The one that cuts Samantha out completely. The one that returns every property, every account, every drop of legacy to the places and people I chose. The best part? Samantha's already signed documents that confirm her involvement in certain financial transfers. She just doesn't know those documents are admissible. I'll let Evelyn handle that part. Quietly. Legally. With the precision of someone who's waited years for this moment. After dinner, I'll ask Samantha to sit with me. In the drawing room. The one with the portraits of my mother and grandmother staring down from the walls. We'll talk. I'll offer her tea. And I'll begin the conversation not with anger, but with a story. Because that's what this has always been, one of those stories soaked in betrayal, stitched in suspense, and laced with a twist that no one saw coming. Except me. Because I wrote it. The drawing room smelled of bergamot and smoke. I sat in my usual chair, high-backed, velvet-lined, the one Charles used to call my throne. The portraits above us loomed, ancestors carved in oil and gaze. Samantha arrived 5 minutes late. Intentional. A small power play. She smoothed her dress, adjusted a diamond bracelet she'd bought with my money, and sat across from me. Tea? I offered, my voice calm. She blinked, surprised. Of course. I poured slowly. Let the silence fill the room like fog. Then I looked up and smiled. You've been busy, dear. Renovating. Organizing. Restructuring the future, haven't you? She tilted her head, playing polite. Only what Michael and I agreed upon. You've had so much on your mind. There it was again. The veil of concern. The sweet poison. I stirred my tea. You know, Samantha, I was once like you. Sharp. Strategic. Beautiful, even. I ran companies while people assumed I couldn't run a household. I built empires in boardrooms filled with men who called me sweetheart and thought I didn't know the value of silence. She didn't answer, but her hands tensed slightly. I know this story, I continued softly. It's one of betrayal. A tale of shifting power and quiet revenge. I've lived it. I've watched it unfold, over and over again. But the best stories, the ones with real suspense, are the ones where the victim isn't. Now her smile faltered. I'm not confused, Samantha. I'm not forgetful. And I'm certainly not out of time. She sat very still. Your name is not on the will, I said, watching her eyes. Not on the real one. Not on the trusts. Not on the properties. In fact, your name is attached to nothing. Except an investigation. She opened her mouth. Closed it. I've documented everything. The forged filings. The diverted funds. The conversations overheard. And Evelyn. I gestured toward the hallway. She arrived an hour ago. She's been in the study, preparing the next chapter. Now she stood. You're bluffing. Sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. And she did. Slowly, her face pale, lips drawn tight. This house, this name, this legacy, none of it was ever yours. You thought you could erase me with time and tea and whispers. You thought if you painted me senile, the world would look the other way while you carved up my life. The room was quiet, except for the ticking clock. But I was never senile. Just silent. And now I'm speaking. She swallowed. Michael won't believe you. Oh, but he will. I've shown him the documents. Had a quiet word. Gave him time to reflect. He's always been slow to wake, but he does wake eventually. The suspense in her face was almost beautiful, a mix of dread and disbelief. The realization that the story she thought she authored was someone else's script entirely. You'll regret this, she whispered. No, I said, standing now taller than I'd felt in years. You will. But not because of what I've done. Because of what you've lost. I turned toward the hallway. Come, I said. Evelyn is waiting. Evelyn stood as we entered, elegant in charcoal gray, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, a woman sculpted from granite and law. On the desk before her were 3 neatly stacked folders. Samantha's eyes flicked toward them, and in that split-second glance, I saw it, recognition. She knew the contents. She just never expected me to have them. Mrs. Mallory, Evelyn greeted me with a warm nod. We're ready. Samantha stayed near the doorway, suddenly the outsider in the home she once ruled. Her poise was cracked, her certainty splintered. And oh, how quickly the suspense unraveled when truth took center stage. Evelyn opened the first folder. This contains your original will, dated 2 years prior to your illness. Untouched, verified, and reinforced with audio and visual witness documentation. Samantha swallowed hard. The second, Evelyn continued, contains unauthorized financial activities traced to several shell companies, companies tied to your daughter-in-law's signature and identity, using accounts connected to your philanthropic fund. I never forged documents, Samantha. I interrupted calmly. You forged them. Or bribed someone to help. Either way, they traced everything back to you. Her voice rose. Michael knows I would never, he does now, I said. Evelyn handed me the third folder. Inside was the reversal clause, an addition I'd made months ago. A final twist, as poetic as it was brutal. I had a feeling, I said, meeting Samantha's stunned gaze, that you'd attempt to remove me from my own story. So I created a contingency. If any illegal actions were detected by you, or anyone acting under your direction, your right to inheritance would not just be void, it would activate a reversion. To what? She snapped. To the foundation, I answered. To charity. To scholarships. To those who deserve it. You walk away with nothing. No. She stepped forward. You can't do this. I already have. Evelyn closed the folder with a soft click. The board has been notified. The legal team is ready. The estate transitions in 72 hours. Samantha stared at me, eyes wild. You let me live here for months while you planned this? Yes, I said. Because that's what you do when you've built a life around suspense and betrayal. You let the villain think they've won until they're halfway off the cliff. She turned toward the door. Michael won't let this stand. He already has. He signed off this morning. It was the final blow. I watched her crumble, just a little. The anger didn't vanish, but the confidence did. The tiger teeth dulled to kitten claws. You don't belong in this house anymore, Samantha, I said softly. You never did. And with that, she left the study. Not a word more. Just the sound of her footsteps, faster than usual, desperate to escape a story that refused to give her the ending she wanted. 3 days passed. Quietly, gracefully. Samantha packed her things without ceremony. There were no final words, no last-minute apologies, no desperate pleas. Only silence and a car that pulled away down the gravel driveway at 6:43 a.m., tires hissing against damp stone like the sound of surrender. Michael didn't watch her leave. He stood beside me in the breakfast room, staring into his coffee, his eyes somewhere between guilt and grief. But he didn't defend her. Not anymore. Some part of him, maybe the boy who once played chess at my knee, finally saw the full board. You were right, he murmured. You were always right. I know, I replied. The staff returned to their normal rhythm that morning, though something had shifted. Doors opened for me again. My tea was brewed precisely the way I liked it. And in the garden, the head gardener asked if I'd like to choose the spring bulbs myself. I said yes, for the first time in years. This house, my house, felt alive again. It remembered me, as if the walls had been holding their breath, waiting for the one who built them to reclaim her place. In the days that followed, I moved room by room, touching every surface like a pianist reacquainting herself with old keys. The grand piano in the east parlor? I had it tuned. The tapestries? I had them restored. And the locked cabinet in the upstairs hallway, the one Samantha always said was unsafe for someone of your age, I opened it and found my collection of rare books exactly where I'd left them, untouched by the lies that tried to rewrite my story. Evelyn stayed one more night. Over a quiet dinner, she said, You didn't just win, Judith. You rewrote the ending. I nodded. But not just for me, because this wasn't just about one woman stealing from another. It was about all the stories, yes, stories of older women silenced, dismissed, hidden behind drapes of faux concern and soft-voiced control. It was about power reclaimed in a world that often pretends we've aged out of it. I drafted a letter that evening, one I planned to have published anonymously. A warning, wrapped in a memoir. Beware the woman you try to erase. She is the one with the longest memory, the deepest patience, and the most dangerous truths. This isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a story of survival, of suspense that burns slow but ends in flame. And when the smoke clears, you'll find her standing not broken, not bitter, but brilliant. That night, I slept with the windows open. The wind moved gently through the curtains. No fear, no watching over my shoulder. Just peace and the faint scent of jasmine from the garden. The next chapter of my life begins now. And I will write every word of it. 2 weeks passed. Peace had returned, like the stillness after a storm. I spent my mornings in the garden, pruning what Samantha had neglected, and my afternoons walking the halls as if reacquainting myself with a kingdom returned. Michael kept his distance, quiet, uncertain, but present. I thought he was mourning the illusion more than the woman. I let him have his silence. Until the letter came. Evelyn brought it to me personally, her face pale. "It was filed in the city registry this morning," she said, setting the envelope down before me. I didn't see it coming. I opened it. My breath caught in my chest. It was a copy of a legal claim, filed in Michael's name. My son. He was contesting the reversal clause, arguing mental coercion, undue influence, and claiming my power of attorney had never been fully revoked. Worse, he'd hired Samantha's attorney. The twist hit harder than any betrayal I'd known. Michael had waited. Let Samantha burn. Let her take the fall. And while I thought he'd chosen me, he'd been waiting for the smoke to clear, to make his own move. The son I raised, the one I taught chess and legacy and patience, had learned too well. He used my silence against me. He'd already frozen 2 of the accounts tied to the foundation. Filed an injunction to prevent property transfer. The courts would now have to review Judith Mallory's cognitive condition at the time of revision. The same lies Samantha once whispered, now wearing Michael's voice. I sank into my chair. My fingers trembled, not from age, but fury. The suspense wasn't over. This wasn't just betrayal. This was betrayal's echo. And yet I smiled, because in my study, in the hidden compartment of my desk, was one more envelope. Unopened. Labeled in Charles's handwriting, "If he turns." A safeguard I never thought I'd need. I reached for it, my mind already racing. Because this isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of war, and war favors the one who never stops planning. The envelope was heavier than it looked. I sat alone in the study as dusk spilled across the windows. The fire hadn't been lit, but the chill in the room was unmistakable. Betrayal has a way of cooling even the warmest places. I held the envelope between my fingers, tracing the edges. The handwriting, Charles's, was unmistakable. Steady. Decisive. If he turns. He always worried about Michael. He's too quiet, Charles used to say. Too agreeable. The ones who nod are often the ones digging graves. I slit the envelope open with my antique letter opener. Inside, 1 page, thick stock, cream-colored, and a key. The letter read, "Judith, if you are reading this, then he's made his move." I had hoped he'd become a man of character, but if he's betrayed you, then the legacy cannot pass to him. I've made alternate arrangements. Use the key. In the basement vault, behind the second false panel, there is a safe deposit box number and a contact name. Her name is Mara. She has instructions to execute a transfer that bypasses all estate claims. Everything gets liquidated. The properties, the companies, the art, even the foundation. And it all goes to someone else, the granddaughter I never got to meet. My hand shook, not with weakness, but revelation. Charles had known. He knew Michael might not deserve the weight of what we built. So he'd created a final contingency. A secret heir. A bloodline bypass. A way to erase our son's betrayal with one final twist. And I remembered. Decades ago, before Michael married Samantha, there was another woman. Brief. Passionate. Michael had ended it under pressure. She'd left quietly. I never heard from her again. I never knew she was pregnant. I took the key and moved quickly, heart pounding not from fear, but purpose. Down the stone stairs, through the old cellar hallway. Past the wine racks. Past the vault door Samantha never knew existed. Behind the second panel, hidden behind stacked boxes of holiday decorations, was a smaller vault. One I had never opened. The key clicked. Inside, a file folder, 2 passports, an address in Marseille, and a trust account ledger worth more than the rest of the estate combined. In the name of Lena Whitmore. Age 26. Artist. Traveler. Granddaughter. There, taped inside the folder, was a photograph. She had my eyes. The suspense that had ruled this house was over. The game had changed. Michael thought he could outplay me, that he'd quietly file claims and let the courts wear me down. But now I held a new piece, one he couldn't see coming. Because the story doesn't end when the son betrays the mother. It ends when the mother chooses a new heir. The photograph stayed on my nightstand all night. I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at her face, Lena Whitmore. The angle was candid, unposed. She stood in front of a canvas, brush in hand, her long hair pulled back in a loose braid. Paint on her cheek. The kind of confidence you can't fake. And those eyes mine, but clearer. As if life hadn't yet taught her to doubt them. She didn't even know who she was. Who we were. But she was about to. I made the call to Evelyn at sunrise. We're changing the strategy, I said. Begin the transfer to Lena. There was a pause. Then, understood. We activated the protocol Charles had designed in secret, the granddaughter clause. In it, if any direct heirs were deemed legally or ethically unfit, the entire estate would divert to the next eligible bloodline, regardless of name, distance, or contact. It had never been triggered. Until now. It would take 2 days to locate her. Evelyn dispatched a private investigator. I instructed them to move quietly. No lawyers. No documents yet. Just eyes. A soft approach. This wasn't just business, it was redemption. The final suspense twist in a story that was meant to bury me. Michael knew nothing. Not yet. He still believed this was about wills and courts and aging. Still believed he could manage me the way Samantha tried. I saw it in his demeanor, sorrow, but not shame. As if betrayal could be softened with enough polite distance. 2 days passed. Then Evelyn called. She's in Lisbon, she said. Backpacking across Europe. She's an artist. Paints for local galleries. Never asks for much. Lives in a rented studio near the waterfront. The contact spoke to her, gently. She agreed to meet with you. I sat very still. Did she ask why? No, Evelyn said. But she said your name felt familiar. I booked the jet that night. Not the big one, not the kind Samantha used for show. A smaller craft, discreet. Charles always kept it for emergencies. This, qualified. As the plane lifted into the clouds, I looked down at the estate, my empire. Once stolen, now reclaimed. But not for myself. For her. For the one who hadn't even known she was born into a suspenseful story full of betrayal, silence, and legacy. She was the twist. The surprise no one accounted for. And when I met her, when I looked into those eyes across a Portuguese cafe table the next morning, I saw not just hope. I saw justice. Lena, I said, reaching for her hand. My name is Judith Mallory. I'm your grandmother. Her eyes filled, but she didn't pull away. I don't want your money, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why you deserve it. We landed just after dusk. The air was colder than when I'd left, the kind of chill that seeps into the bones, not from weather, but from knowing what must be done. Lena stepped off the plane beside me, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder. No designer luggage, no entourage. Just her. Real. Present. And unknowingly about to change everything. She didn't ask many questions on the flight. She simply listened. As I told her about Charles, about the estate, about the story she was born into but had been kept from. She asked only once about Michael. I told her the truth. He forgot how to be a son. We pulled into the estate as the house lights glowed warmly through tall windows. I watched Lena take it all in her silence, filled with awe and unease. You grew up here? She asked. No, I said. I built this. The staff had been informed. Instructions were clear. Lena was to be treated as family. Not just a guest. Not just blood. But the heir. We entered through the grand doors, the portraits watching, the velvet curtains still, the air thick with inheritance and reckoning. Michael was in the drawing room. He stood when we entered. His face paled. "Who is this?" I stepped aside. "Michael, this is Lena Whitmore. Your niece." He stared at her. Then at me. "This is insane." "No," I said softly. "This is justice. You've brought in a stranger to steal." "She's not a stranger," I said. "She's your daughter's daughter." "I never knew she existed." "I didn't either. But you gave up your right to the truth when you filed against me." He turned to Lena. "And you're okay with this? Taking everything that should have come to me?" Lena's voice was soft, but it didn't waver. "I didn't ask for this. But I also didn't steal it." Michael's mouth opened. Closed. "You gambled," I told him. "You stood back and watched Samantha try to destroy me. You used her fall to make your own move. But you forget, this isn't a courtroom drama. It's one of those old stories. The kind where betrayal is punished and legacy finds its rightful heir." Evelyn stepped forward with the final papers. The trust transfer. The revocation of Michael's claim. The legal recognition of Lena as sole beneficiary of the estate. Michael didn't take them. He turned and walked out. No apology. No outburst. Just the heavy silence of a man who played the wrong game, too late. Lena and I stood alone in the room. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Because stories like this, ones soaked in betrayal and suspense, they don't end with silence. They end with a woman like you, rewriting what comes next." She smiled, small and stunned. I took her hand, and we stepped forward together. Spring arrived a little early that year. The gardens bloomed brighter than I remembered. The tulips came up in perfect rows, the lavender spread like soft laughter through the air, and the roses, oh, the roses rose higher along the stone archway than they had in years. I sat on the terrace with Lena, 2 mugs of tea between us. She was barefoot, paint-streaked, radiant. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, filled with inked impressions of the estate. Her eyes scanned everything with reverence and curiosity. Not greed, not entitlement, just wonder. She had been living in the East Wing for a month now. She'd already transformed it into a studio, white walls, high ceilings, natural light pouring in. The old ghosts had left that part of the house. Or perhaps they'd simply settled. Michael hadn't returned. No calls, no letters. And strangely, I didn't feel anger anymore. Not even sadness. Just stillness. The kind that comes after finishing the last page of a long, difficult book. Evelyn joined us briefly that morning to hand over the final documents. Everything was done. The estate, the holdings, the trusts, all transferred. The name Lena Whitmore was now etched where others had expected their own. She flipped through one of the ledgers, brow furrowed. "It's so much, Judith." I smiled. "Yes, and none of it came freely. But it's not a weight, it's a pen. You write what happens next." She nodded, fingers curled around the leather cover. "You know," I said softly, "people think power is what you hold. But real power is what you leave behind. What you give. Who you choose to become when no one is watching." Lena looked up. "Do you think I'll be ready?" I reached across the table, touched her hand. "You already are. Because the truth is, stories like mine don't end with revenge. They end with restoration. With someone worthy rising from the wreckage of betrayal and writing a better chapter than the one before. And if you're listening, if you've ever felt erased, silenced, underestimated, know this. Your story isn't over. In fact, the best part may just be beginning." It was strange how quickly peace began to feel like a borrowed coat, comfortable at first, then gradually unfamiliar the longer you wore it. That's how it felt in the days after Michael's failed challenge and Samantha's final exit. The estate was still. Too still. The kind of quiet that doesn't calm you, but warns you. I spent my mornings with Lena in the sunroom. She had turned it into a studio of sorts, the light pouring in from the tall windows dancing across her canvas as she worked. I would sip my tea, watching her brush strokes in silence. There was something beautiful about the way she painted, raw, instinctual, fearless. A stark contrast to the life she'd left behind. She'd grown up with little. She told me once, over breakfast, that she'd never even had a place of her own for more than a year. Now she had wings to stretch, and the whole house welcomed her like it had waited decades for someone like her. But peace is a fragile thing. One afternoon, as I was organizing the back library, a room Samantha had all but abandoned, I found a letter. Folded. Untouched. It was addressed to me, but not in a hand I recognized. The envelope was thin, no return address, the handwriting tight and slanted. I opened it carefully. Judith, you may have won the estate, but some things were never yours to begin with. Watch your legacy closely. Not all thieves knock at the door. A friend, my heart stopped. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, but not from fear. From fury. For weeks, I had allowed myself to believe the worst was over. That Lena's arrival had marked a new chapter, free of betrayal and manipulation. But someone, somewhere, was still playing the game. And this time, they were smart enough not to show their face. I slid the letter into the pocket of my cardigan and went straight to the study. Evelyn wasn't due back for another day, but I left a message with her assistant. We need to talk. Urgently. Trust no one. That night, I double-checked the safe in the hidden alcove behind the wine cellar. Everything was untouched. The real will. The asset transfer files. The backup of Charles's final letter. It was all still there. But it wasn't just the estate they were after anymore. This was personal. And the most dangerous kind of suspense is the one that wears silence like a mask. The letter haunted me. I read it 3 times that night, each word soaking deeper into my bones. Not all thieves knock at the door. That line clung to me like a chill. It wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. A message from someone who knew this estate, knew my past, and more importantly, knew how to slip between the cracks undetected. The next morning, I began my search. I didn't tell Lena. Not yet. She was just beginning to find peace here. I wouldn't steal that from her, not until I was sure what we were facing. Instead, I went room by room, revisiting every space I had once locked down in my mind. The parlor, the guest wing, the upstairs drawing room where Samantha had once whispered over the phone, believing I couldn't hear. Then the east wing, the servants' quarters from decades ago, now unused, quiet, preserved like an old memory under dust. That's when I found it. Behind an armoire in the farthest room of the east wing, I noticed scratches on the floor, tiny, thin grooves where wood had shifted against stone. I pulled the heavy cabinet away, and there, tucked behind it, was a narrow door. Hidden in shadow. Locked with a simple latch. My fingers trembled as I turned the handle. Inside, a small passageway. Stone walls. No more than 4 feet wide. I remembered it then. Charles had told me about the old servant corridors when we first moved in. We had sealed most of them off during renovations. Or so I thought. But this one hadn't been sealed. It had been preserved. I followed the narrow path, feeling the brush of cobwebs across my arms, the cold of undisturbed air. After several turns and 1 steep stairwell, I emerged behind the paneling of the library wall, through a seam so perfectly aligned with the bookshelves that no one would ever notice unless they were looking for it. Someone had been using this. I searched the area and found fresh footprints in the dust. Not staff shoes. Smaller, lighter, a careful tread. Someone had been moving through this house, watching, listening. I closed the panel and sat down heavily in the library chair. The betrayal had spread further than I imagined. It wasn't just Samantha. Not just Michael. There was someone else in the shadows. Someone with access. Someone who knew how to be invisible. The estate wasn't safe. Not yet. That evening, I called Evelyn. When she answered, I didn't waste time. I found the passage, I said. The old one. There was a pause on the other end. Then Evelyn's voice dropped into a whisper. Then we're not alone. Evelyn arrived just after dusk. She didn't use the front entrance. She came through the side gate, coat collar up, eyes scanning the driveway as if she already suspected eyes were watching. I met her at the garden archway, where the lavender no longer bloomed but still whispered underfoot. We didn't speak until we were inside the study. I closed the curtains myself, locked the door, and lit the fireplace with trembling hands. "Someone's been in the house," I said. "Not recently. Regularly." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I believe you." She pulled a slim folder from her bag and opened it across the table. Inside were photographs. Surveillance stills. Grainy, black and white. Most were exterior shots, someone in a hooded coat moving around the West Wing at night, slipping through hedges and ducking cameras. "Captured by one of the hidden trail cams your late husband installed near the stables," she said. "Michael doesn't know they exist." Neither did Samantha. I flipped through them. And then my breath caught. The figure in the photo wasn't a stranger. It was someone I knew. I leaned in closer. "Is that?" "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "Her name is Camille. She was one of the estate's private caretakers. Retired 10 years ago. Or so we thought." Camille. My old housekeeper. Loyal. Quiet. Never married. She'd left suddenly after Charles died. I had sent her a final check and a farewell letter. I never heard from her again. Until now. She never moved out, Evelyn said. Records show she's been using an old cottage on the edge of your forest line off-grid, unregistered. It's technically still part of your property. She's been living there. Watching. Waiting. For what? I asked. For the estate to fall. The next photo showed Camille slipping into the same East Wing corridor I had discovered. She knew the passages better than I did. She had likely been using them for months, maybe years. And now I realized what the letter meant. Some things were never yours to begin with. Camille believed she had a claim. And in a way, maybe she did. She had cared for this house when we were young and overwhelmed. Had managed the staff while Charles and I brokered deals from 5 continents away. She had known this place longer than any of the current staff. She was its eyes, its memory, but her silence had twisted into something else. Evelyn placed a final sheet on the table, a handwritten copy of a letter Camille had sent to the local probate office under a pseudonym. It accused me of forging Charles's estate revisions. Claimed I had manipulated him in his final months. Claimed she was the only one who knew his true wishes. A letter from a ghost. "She's trying to take it all," I whispered. From the shadows. Evelyn leaned in. "What do you want to do?" I looked down at the last photograph, Camille standing just at the edge of the trees, watching the house. My house. We invite her in. The invitation was handwritten. I used the old stationery, the one with the estate seal embossed in the corner, and signed it with the name I hadn't written in years, Judith Mallory. No tricks. No threats. Just a simple request. "Camille, we need to talk. Come home." Evelyn delivered it herself, walking the trail just before sunrise. The cottage on the property's edge had once been used to house guests, long before Samantha decided it was too old to matter. It sat beneath a crooked pine, moss-covered and nearly swallowed by time. Camille had made it invisible. She came 2 nights later. No fanfare. No ceremony. I heard the creak of the back gate and knew it was her even before the staff knocked to announce a visitor. Lena was asleep. Evelyn stayed in the parlor. This meeting, I decided, was mine alone. She entered through the garden door. She looked older, of course, but not frail. Her back was straight, her eyes clear, and her clothes plain but neat. She held no umbrella despite the rain. Her gaze moved slowly across the study, lingering on the fireplace, the portraits, the rug I'd kept since Charles passed. "Nothing's changed," she said softly. "Everything's changed," I replied. We sat across from each other. No tea. No pretense. Just air thick with history and silence. "I always thought you'd call me back," Camille said. "But you never did. After Charles. After the will changed. I knew something wasn't right. You left," I reminded her. Without warning. I left because I was asked to. I blinked. By who? By Charles. The silence cracked. She reached into her coat and pulled out a yellowed envelope, creased at the corners, sealed with the same wax I used for private letters. She slid it across the table. I opened it with trembling hands. Judith, if anything happens to me too quickly and you're not given the full truth, trust Camille. She knows where the first version of the will is hidden. She will know what I wanted. Not just for the estate, but for you. Don't forget who kept us standing when we didn't have a clue what we were doing. Charles the First looked up. Camille's eyes were rimmed with tears. He made me promise not to say anything unless I believed you were in danger. I kept watch. I waited. But I never saw the Samantha betrayal coming, not until it was too late. And by then, I thought you'd rewritten everything. I was silent. All this time, I had thought Camille's presence was a threat. That she was the final antagonist in a long line of betrayal stories. But she hadn't been watching me. She'd been guarding me. You left the anonymous letter? I asked. She nodded. I needed you to know someone was still watching. That your legacy wasn't as safe as you thought. I couldn't reveal myself. Not yet. I leaned back, exhaling years of tension. The house felt different now, like it had exhaled too. I'm sorry, I whispered, for shutting you out. Camille gave a small, sad smile. We all do what we must to survive, Judith. But I didn't come back for forgiveness. I came back because you're not done fighting yet. My breath caught. What do you mean? She glanced toward the window. Michael's not gone. He's just hiding, and he's not working alone anymore. Camille's words hit me like a cold slap. Michael wasn't gone. He was waiting, watching, and he wasn't working alone anymore. I gripped the edge of the table as the weight of her warning settled over me. The idea that another betrayal had already taken root inside these walls was enough to pull the air from the room. Who? I asked. Who is helping him? Camille didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, walked slowly to the fireplace, and stared into the embers like she was looking backward through time. Someone young, she said finally. Smart, tech-savvy. Someone who doesn't know the history of this place, but thinks they've figured it all out. I've seen him twice now, midnight visits to the West Corridor. Once with a phone in hand, recording. Another time, whispering into a call. You followed him? No. I listened. He's working on something. A document trail. Trying to disprove the new will. I heard him mention Evelyn's name. And yours. I felt a tremor run through my spine. The only other person with access to that part of the house, the only one who moved freely, had access to documents, and could slip unnoticed into forgotten corners, was David, Lena's assistant. He had arrived quietly 2 weeks after Lena moved in. A soft-spoken young man with wide eyes and gentle manners. Lena said she hired him to help manage her growing responsibilities, emails, scheduling, correspondence with Evelyn's legal team. I hadn't questioned it. I should have. I stood abruptly. If he's copying files he already has, Camille interrupted. I found a hidden thumb drive in the back hallway, tucked behind the molding. I didn't touch it. I wanted you to see it first. I moved quickly through the corridor, Camille trailing silently behind me. We reached the hallway that led to the old wine gallery. And there, precisely where she had said, wedged between the wall and a heating vent, was a flash drive. I retrieved it with gloved hands. It was unmarked silver, cold to the touch. I turned to Camille. If he's connected to Michael, he's more than connected. He's paid. I returned to the study and plugged the drive into the encrypted laptop Charles left behind. What I found was worse than expected. Scanned documents, annotated pages from the old will, partial copies of private emails between Evelyn and me, voice memos of my conversations, secretly recorded. Lena doesn't know, Camille said. I nodded slowly, my jaw tight. She can't. Not until I know how deep this goes. Because this betrayal wasn't just against me. It was against her, too. And once again, my legacy, the life I fought to rebuild, was under siege. But this time, it wasn't just from the shadows. It was from within. And I wasn't going to let it fall. There's something sacred about a plan whispered only to the walls. I didn't tell Lena. Not yet. I didn't want her to see what I was about to do, not until the curtain fell and the final actors took their bow. Some truths I've learned are better revealed at the end of the performance, not before the stage is lit. I met with Evelyn before sunrise in the solarium. The room still smelled faintly of turpentine and wet brushes from Lena's last painting session. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds. I want you to prepare a decoy, Will, I said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A decoy? A completely false revision, one that includes suspicious clauses, a massive overseas transfer, a reallocation of funds, something juicy enough to bait a thief. She folded her arms slowly. And where would this revision happen to be kept? In my desk drawer. Unlocked. Evelyn smiled. You're setting a trap. No, I said. I'm setting a mirror. Let's see what the rat does when he sees his reflection. She left shortly after to prepare the documents. Camille stayed close, watching the corridors, checking the entry points, nodding at the staff, but saying nothing. She had melted into the estate like ivy again, and I was grateful for her silence and steadiness. That afternoon, I invited David for tea in the drawing room. He arrived exactly on time. Polished. Polite. Exactly the kind of clean-cut assistant no one questions. I just wanted to thank you, I said, for all the help you've given Lena. She speaks highly of you. His smile didn't falter. She's been wonderful. Very kind. I'm lucky to be here. Yes, I said, sipping my tea. We all are. And we're very protective of what we have here. Very careful with records, correspondence, private documents. He nodded. Of course. I held his gaze a moment longer. He blinked first. I didn't accuse him. I didn't hint. But I saw it, the slight twitch in his jaw, the quick glance to the hallway behind me. He was nervous. Good. Later that night, I placed the forged will in my desk drawer and left the lamp on. The light from the hallway spilled gently through the crack in the door. Then I waited. Camille watched from the east corridor. Evelyn remained in the guest lounge with a clear view of the stairwell. At 2:17 a.m., the desk drawer creaked open. Camille radioed once. Quiet. Controlled. I walked softly down the hall and stopped just before the drawing room. David stood alone, flashlight in one hand, the decoy will in the other. He didn't hear me until I cleared my throat. He froze. I stepped forward, calm and deliberate. You picked the wrong house to steal from. His mouth opened, then closed. There was no explanation. No lie quick enough. From the doorway behind him, Evelyn and Camille appeared. David dropped the flashlight. I want names, I said. How long have you been working with Michael? What did he promise you? His voice shook. He said, once the foundation shifted, I'd get a cut. He said Lena didn't need all of it, that it would only take one push. One lie, I corrected. And now you've made it. The next morning, I told her. Lena sat in the solarium, cross-legged in the light, painting streaks of amber and blue across a canvas. She looked so calm, so untouched by the poison that had crept into our walls. For a moment, I considered keeping it from her, letting the storm pass over without her knowing, but that would have made me no better than the ones who tried to control me. Lena, I said softly, we need to talk. She turned, brush still in hand. What's wrong? I took the chair across from her, inhaled once, then began. I told her everything. About Camille. The hidden passage. The letter. The photographs. The stolen files. The flash drive. The trap. And finally, David. At first, she just listened. But as the story unspooled, her hands clenched around the brush until the bristles bent in her palm. He was in my room, she said, her voice a thin thread. He read my emails, my letters to Evelyn. He betrayed me. Yes, I said. And he did it for Michael. Her jaw tensed. He knew how much this meant to me. That's exactly why Michael sent him. Tears didn't fall, not yet. But her eyes shimmered, the kind that held back storms behind a dam of willpower. She wiped her hands on a cloth and stood, pacing once, then turning sharply. What now? I stood as well. Now, we finish this. We moved quickly. Camille contacted the local security firm that once protected the estate before Charles's death. Evelyn filed formal charges, attempted estate fraud, data theft, breach of fiduciary trust. We documented everything. Timestamps, surveillance footage, the forged documents David tried to hide in a hollowed book spine. Michael was cornered. But snakes strike hardest when caged. The next night, I received an anonymous package. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive and a type note. You wanted war. Now watch what it costs you. I plugged the drive into my secure offline system. It contained one thing: a video, a darkly lit room, a voice, distorted, a series of falsified documents presented as evidence that Charles had never intended the estate to pass to Lena, that I had altered medical records to claim mental clarity during the will's final update. He wasn't trying to take the estate anymore. He was trying to destroy our names. It wasn't about money now, it was legacy warfare. If he couldn't win, he'd turn the house into ashes. I stared at the screen. You want a fire, I whispered. You've forgotten who planted these roots. Because unlike Michael, I didn't need to scream. I needed to strike, quietly, legally, permanently. By dawn, I was already dressed. A storm had rolled in during the night, sharp wind, low thunder, and that steady hiss of rain across the estate roofs. I watched it from the library windows, my tea untouched, the note from the package still lying on the table like a curse. Michael had made it clear, he wasn't trying to reclaim anything anymore. He was trying to salt the earth, to scorch the history, so no one could claim it, not me, and certainly not Lena. But what he hadn't accounted for was that I knew fire better than he did. And I'd spent my entire life preparing for this exact kind of betrayal. Evelyn arrived at 8 a.m., sharp with her raincoat dripping and her bag heavy with documents. Camille followed behind her carrying a second case, this one older, locked and sealed with Charles's private crest. Something we hadn't touched in over a decade. Is that the original litigation binder? I asked. Evelyn nodded. The entire family archive, medical reports, video footage, witness statements, financial audits, notarized, stamped, and preserved. Every document Michael is trying to fake. We already have the truth on record. And what about public release? I asked. She gave me a small smile. Already in motion. When we press send, 3 things will happen. 1. The legal community will receive verified digital records. The media will receive a curated, transparent history of the estate's transition. And a personal statement, signed by you and Lena, will appear across all platforms. I stared at the old crest on the folder, the Mallory seal embossed in wax. For decades, I had thought it represented weight, wealth, authority. Now I realized it meant something far more powerful. Legacy earned through truth. Do it, I said. All of it. Camille left the room to make the call. Lena entered just as the final drafts were printing. She wore all black, sharp, elegant, with her hair swept up like a crown. She was no longer a girl who had been handed something. She was a woman defending what she'd earned. You ready? She asked. More than ever, I said. The release went live at 9:06 a.m. At 9:11 a.m., Michael called. I didn't answer. At 9:25 a.m., a message came through Evelyn's office. I didn't think you'd go public. And at 9:31 a.m., we watched the internet begin to swallow his smear campaign whole. The story exploded. But it wasn't his version they told, it was ours. The headlines read, Estate War Ends in Vindication for Heiress Lena Whitmore. Former son accused of fraud in legacy dispute. Truth behind the Mallory name. A matriarch's last stand. By midday, Michael's legal representatives withdrew their petitions. His statement never came. And the silence that followed, that was the sound of defeat. The kind of silence that tastes like justice. The storm passed by evening. The air outside was crisp, and the ground smelled of pine and damp stone. I stepped outside alone, wrapped in my wool coat, and took the long path from the terrace to the garden gates. Everything was soaked, but somehow cleaner, like the rain had stripped away the lies along with the dust. Inside, Lena was in the study, signing the final documents with Evelyn. The last of the legal transitions. The real end to Michael's schemes. The beginning of our legacy. I reached the willow tree at the center of the garden, its drooping branches heavy with rain, its roots still clutching the earth like old hands. Charles had planted it when we moved here. We called it the listening tree because it stood in the quietest corner of the property. And now it stood over me as I exhaled the last 20 years. Grief, control, silence, survival, power. I had lived through it all beneath this roof. I had watched love die here, watched power mutate, watched my own family try to erase me like a name in dust. But I had also seen rebirth. Because Lena was not just a new heir, she was the right one. And for the first time in my life, I no longer felt the need to guard everything. No longer needed vaults and safes and contingency clauses. I had earned peace. And I had earned her. By the time I returned to the house, Lena was already waiting. The foundation papers are ready, she said. I'm naming it after him. I smiled. Charles. She nodded. But I'm also naming the main building after you. I raised an eyebrow. It'll be called the Alohan Gallery, she said quietly. Because if there's one thing the world should never forget, it's that this story didn't begin with me. My throat caught. She reached out and took my hand. You saved the legacy. Now let me carry it. In that moment, something shifted between us, not just love, not just trust, but legacy itself. It moved from my hand to hers like an heirloom passed down not through blood, but through truth. Later, I watched from the window as she walked through the west garden, clipboard in hand, planning a sculpture installation. Young, fierce, rooted. And I thought to myself, this is how you win. Not by fighting forever, but by knowing when to pass the torch and who to trust to carry it without burning the house down. To my dearest Lena, if you're reading this, it means I've stepped away, maybe not from life entirely, but from the helm of it. You've taken your place in the story now, not as a shadow of me or Charles, but as your own woman, your own fire. There's something I never told you. In all the years I spent protecting this estate, through marriages, betrayals, false wills, forged smiles, I never truly felt safe. Not until you stood in the study and told me you didn't want the money, just the truth. That was the moment I knew I hadn't just saved the legacy. I had rewritten it. You were never meant to carry the sins of this house. But you chose to shoulder its weight anyway, because some part of you, some deep, old part, understood that legacy isn't about what we leave behind. It's about how we leave it. The world will try to take things from you, Lena. Your voice, your story, your kindness. There will be quiet battles and loud ones. Not all enemies will wear cruelty on their sleeves. Some will dress like family. But remember this. Silence is a weapon only when wielded by the wrong hands. And power is only poison when you forget what it was for in the first place. You turned this estate into more than history. You turned it into healing. And that's something I never knew was possible. Beneath the willow tree, I have left you one final gift. It's not money, not land, just a journal. Inside are pages I wrote when I still feared everything would slip away. Notes on mistakes, secrets I never told Charles, letters never sent, and one blank page at the end. That page is yours. Write what comes next. I love you, Judith Mallory. Here the story ends. Thanks for watching. Hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more true and real stories.